I swear by the end of this festival that if Nimrod isn't #1 in the UK charts, I'll be very disappointed. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this evening's session of the Festival of Scale Modelling presented by the Interesting Modelling Company. Well, that was a fun day. A few nerve-wracking moments, I think is the best way of putting it. And a couple of teeny technical issues, but we got there in the end. And I'll be honest with you, it was a blast. I've been sat here in the workshop throughout, kind of keeping the feed, watching the feed and doing the links and everything, and getting on with my Italeri 35th scale Semovente, which is tremendously enjoyable at the moment. So we're on to the evening session now, which we're going to try and keep to 90 minutes tonight, just to kind of keep it nice and brief. 90 minutes brief. So without further ado, we will have a couple of special guests tonight. And in fact, I have the great pleasure now of introducing to you somebody who I've known for longer than I actually knew I knew, longer than I knew, if that makes sense. It's none other than the man we call Mr. Andrew Farmer. It's Mr. Andrew Farmer. Evening, boss. And Andy's feed has gone down.
To either.
Can you hear me, Andy?
I answered either. I can, yes. Can you?
Yeah, your broadband's a bit wibbly wobbly at the moment. Hello? Yeah, can you hear me? No, sorry, Andy. We're going to have to boot you. Can you hear me, Andy? Sorry about that, folks. I'm afraid Andy's broadband has disappeared, so we'll just have to re-invite him. Try to come back in again via link. We were always going to get somebody whose broadband wasn't going to be play ball. So I do apologize for that. So let's have a recap of the day then. We've had an excellent, we started off with Drew doing his Zvezda Hercules, and I think we saw just how exemplary the fit is on that kit with the way that some of the doors and panels just dropped into place. Then we had Jen doing her, was it Jen or Ivan? No, it was Ivan next, doing his Ammo of MIG oil brusher demos, of which I have a few here. And Ivan, very good, because he explained the differences between why the oil brushes are slightly different to oil paints. And I've found that they're slightly waxier and you can blend them a bit better. When they dry, they leave behind like a waxy pigment, which you can then kind of feather and dry. Absolutely brilliant. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. Then we had Jen working on a P40, and she was doing some really good stuff with foil that I'd never really seen before, and doing a very good explanation of how you can sand foil down to get rid of any imperfections. Honestly, watch it. It's a real eye-opener. Then Spencer came along and did the demo of we did the review of the new Italeri 32nd scale Tornado GR4, which he is now currently working on. And I hope you're all having a look at the photographs, because he's built the seat, and the seat does look pretty darn good. Then we had Mike Williams in the afternoon doing his demo from his attic. And he was doing some stuff on the Quinta 3D printed cockpit decals, which they are a real eye-opener. I've got some of their seat belts. If you've not seen the Quinta stuff and you're thinking, what's the difference between this and, say, pre-painted photo etch like the stuff Edouard do? Well, these are 3D printed. So actually you are getting 3D depth to them, as opposed to that kind of 2D effect and makeup of photo etch. And honestly, you've got to see these things when they're installed into the into the cockpits and whatever. They really are quite stunning. A little bit controversial, because people always say, oh, it takes a skill out of modeling, blah 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 blah, but they've been saying that going back all the way to the days when the first plastic kits turned up, and people who carved them out of wooden orange crates said that these nasty little plastic trinkets were going to destroy the hobby. And here we are 60 years later. So we will try again. It is my very great pleasure to introduce, hopefully, on the other end of the line. I mean, bear in mind, we had a perfect signal between me and Chris Buchholz in America. And now I'm only 2 miles away as Mr. Andrew Farmer. So hopefully, can you hear me, Mr. Andrew Farmer?
I can hear you.
Right, brilliant. Right, that's better. You just honestly, you really were soccer special from Bucharest back then. I was expecting Alan Green to come on the line.
I switched to my iPad, so that's a lot better, I think.
Oh yeah, much stronger signal. How are
Yeah,
you, Mr. F?
splendid form. I've had a great day. So I
You weren't
think,
watching us then?
yeah, I think. Well, before we go any further, I think I'd just like to publicly thank the efforts that you have put in, and Spencer and Drew and everybody else, to make this day a resounding success. It's been compulsive listening in many respects. Some of the demos, I mean, I've learned something. I'm not anywhere near an accomplished modeler, but I've learned a great deal today. But thank you for your efforts.
Well, I appreciate that. Perhaps you should explain a bit more about your background, Andy, because you currently work for the hobby company, but you've worked in the model industry. I think it's fair to say pretty much since you left school, really, haven't you?
I have. I often tell the tale of going to my career officer when I was 14 or 15, and him saying to me, "What do you want to be in life?" And I said, "Well, I really don't know." My initial thoughts was to become a policeman, but he said, "Let me give you a tip." He said, "Never make your hobby your career." And I thought that was interesting, because all I knew was building airfix plastic kits and running a model railway. And okay, I thought that was interesting at the time. And then many years ago, on the back of the Railway Modeler, a publication you know well, there appeared an advert which said, "Make your hobby your career." And it was a recruitment purge by Beatties at the time, obviously a nationwide chain of model shops. And cut a long story short, I left my sixth form studies and took a job and got a job with Beatties, and the rest, as they say, is history. So that took us to 1985, and I moved to Bristol, and you and I got to know each other from then on. So that's 35 years, Jonathan.
Well, the scary thought is that you knew me before I knew you, for the simple reason that as a long-haired, I was going to say a skinny long-haired teenager, but as a skinny long-haired teenager, you used to know me because I used to pop into Beatties of Bristol, where you were the manager then, I do believe.
Yeah, I was dangled a carrot to move from the Midlands to Bristol, say back in what was November '85, to be exact. So yeah, I was there for 5.5 years, and so I left in 1990 and went to join Humbrol and Airfix. So, yes.
Which,
sorry, go
on. I was going to say, which is kind of when our paths kind of crossed professionally, I think for the first time, was about 1993 at what would have been Castle Donington, and we were chatting because I knew Trevor Snowden, who was then the head of R&D at Airfix, and I think you knew me more than I knew you, but then you kind of like you handed me one of your cards, and I looked at it, I went, hang about, Clevedon, you live 3 miles away from me. and then that was when, from there, I think you, shall we say, this is a relationship that has continued to this day, is that you ring me up and you'd say, can you build this for me, please? And yeah, and then from there we kind of, it segued from that to me suddenly getting involved in the decal side of work for Airfix at Humbrol, and then thankfully, subsequently through to Hornby as well. But yeah, so you moved on from Hornby in 2006, and then joined the Humbrol in 2006, and then joined the hobby company.
That's right. I took the hit on the chin when Humbrol went into administration. Excuse me. It took 6 months to get re-established, and I joined the hobby company in February 2007. So as I've been gainfully employed, and a tremendous honour to work for so many good brands, particularly Tamiya.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like I say, it's as much as I'm still kind of doing bits and pieces, building stuff for Airfix as and when. Again, we seem to have picked up where we started with Airfix back in 1993, and I get the occasional project, and can you build this? And it's like, yeah, go on then. In fact, I going back to something last year, which, again, this is like two of my favorite projects from last year, and there were two things that I'd never expected I'd ever build in my life, and that was that Italeri Vespa, the 1/9 scale Vespa, and also the Italeri 24 scale Land Rover fire engine fire brigade truck. Completely out of my comfort zone, and yet I look back on those two models now, and I think, this is what I like. I do like as much as I'm enjoying building this Sempervente at the moment, it's suddenly getting that call to say, can you build this? And it's like, it's not something I would ever have thought of building in a million years, but you build it, and then actually you really enjoy the process, and it takes you out of yourself, which I think is important. So it's like I say, so we've known each other professionally and socially. In fact, this year Andy was very kind enough to invite me to my first ever rugby match. Was it Bath versus Wasps? Was it?
It was Bath versus something. I can't quite remember. That was
it Wasps or Saracens? I know I was a good luck omen because they won. So
it might have been Saracens, actually.
That was something I was thinking to myself, well, I'm really looking forward to going to more rugby matches in the autumn. And also we 5 years ago, I do believe, we went to see we spent an afternoon with Sir Roger Moore.
We did, yeah. We had a few good social occasions like that.
It is. So Andy and I are now, we're kind of like, we're old friends now. So it's a pleasure to have you on tonight. Now, Andy,
35 years.
I kind of made references to the fact that, I think like you certainly would have been looking forward to another season at the Rec watching Bath rugby. Obviously, we can't do that at the moment. It's, the economy has at the moment really been hammered by what is going on with COVID-19 and everything. And we're in another period of lockdown, and furlough is going to be extended, etc., etc. But I mentioned this to Matt Whiting from Airfix earlier on, and I'll get your perspective on this as well, is what impact has the pandemic actually had on our hobby from a business point of view?
Well, in simple terms, it's provided the biggest spike in business in certainly my 35 years of being in the trade. There's a lot of sadness, negativity, call it what you want, with this pandemic. But the one thing it has done is given the not just our hobby of plastic kit building, but probably more so with radio control. There's been a tremendous upsurge there. Sure, if Matt was here, he would say the same thing with well,
this is it. Yeah,
the hobby as itself has been galvanized by it, and to say sales have skyrocketed, I think, is an understatement. I mean, particularly back in April when it first started, and people made the conscientious decision to get involved in something that was going to last them a month, 2 months, or whatever else, and sales of plastic kits just went through the roof, to the point where we have a situation today where major companies like Tamir, Talieri, just haven't been able to play catch up. They're getting there, but they were both severely impacted by the onset of COVID when it first came along, more so in Asia. I don't know whether you're aware, but Tamir have got two main factories. One is obviously in Shizuoka, but their main production factory is on the island of Cebu in the Philippines. And being a densely populated area of relatively low social economic standing, they were tremendously impacted when Corona first struck. They were shut down for a good month, I think, back in April and May. It's taken them to now to get back up together. Consequently, with Italieri, obviously the Corona first came to Europe via Italy, and particularly where they are in Bologna, they were also badly affected straight away. But what I say, the positive side of it is that we have seen tremendous influx of new people coming to the hobby. Matt was saying about the Airfix snap together kits, getting people there at the bottom end, but also we've seen people of our age group and younger buying plastic kits for the first time, and also others who have been who haven't modelled for 10, 20, 30 years come back into the hobby, which is tremendous.
I mean, I'll bring Drew and Spencer into the stream in a minute, and I'll leave you to chat for for 10, 15 minutes. But I certainly one of the things that the project that kickstarted Spencer's enthusiasm this year was this kind of Tamiya legacy build thing, and that came about because of you kind of drawing up a list of the best sellers. And I think ironically, Spencer and I we both decided that we're going to build that little Tamiya Panzer II, which turned out it's just one of their best selling kits ever. Which people often wonder, why old kits remain in kit ranges. It's because if they sell, you don't get rid of them. And if you notice in the Tamiya range that they have like a split, like a two-core strategy. You can go out and buy their beautiful brand new tool Brumbear. You can still go out and buy their old one. You can buy their beautiful new tool Jagdpanzer IV Lang. You can still buy the old kit. Tamiya do absolutely fantastic Panthers, but they're still selling their first Panther, which is not a particularly accurate kit. It's not a particularly accurate replica, but actually, in terms of something to actually sit down and build, it's actually a very good kit. And I think sometimes, we have to it's worth making that differentiation, the difference between something being accurate. You can have an accurate kit that builds like a pig, but you can have an inaccurate kit, an inaccurate subject or a kit that actually builds very well. And in terms of that Panther, so yeah, I think it's, I think you've probably got your own comments on, what make up those. Perhaps you could tell everybody what makes up those top 5 Tamiya bestsellers.
Well, I mean, you jokingly refer to Alan Freeman and Pick of the Pots earlier, I think, in one of your commentaries. You can say, coming in at number 5 and go all the way through. But I mean, in essence, the 35065 Panther has not been knocked off the number 1 spot for since the day it came out to the market. Year after year, it is there at the very top of the list. And then you've got...
it is the Bryan Adams of the model kit world. Everybody sat there thinking, I wish somebody would take that off for number 1 spot. But it's just like, everything I do. Oh, no, not again.
And then you've got, Hadamag 35020, the 35009 Panzer Kampfwagen. And then you've got the Chieftain. What's the 5th one? I can't remember. The SAS Chief? I can't remember. Anyway, it's all called 135th Military. But in essence, for the 40th year running, 35065 Panther remains the kit. And I think people are quite astute in their observations. I think Spencer remarked on it at the time when he was doing his build. It is an old kit, but it stands a test of time. And when it comes in at under £20 for a still worthwhile kit, then you can't knock it.
I think Spencer and I, our experience of building the little Panzer II was that it's remarkably good for its age. It holds up very well. It's 49 years old, and the moldings for the most part look absolutely crisp and brand new. But it is just such a ridiculously simple and rapid kit to build, and it's a canvas that you can add whatever you want to in terms of, as a modeler, what you want to do. But it retails at something like just around the £10 mark or something. I mean, you can see why that's never really disappeared from the range. It's just an utterly fantastic kit. Like I say, you have to differentiate, nearly got that word right, between an accurate replica and a very good kit. And this is just a very, very good kit. But I tell you what, Andy, I'm going to throw you to the wolves now, because they're there, they're baying in the background, howling away here. So I'll leave you 3 gentlemen, it says written down here on a piece of paper, to have a chat. I can see Drew shaking his head here. So on that note, I shall bring in Mr. SP and Mr. DM, and I shall exit stage left, and I'll come back in probably in about 10-15 minutes time, and and sort out the wreckage. So for now, gentlemen, good evening. The floor.
Okay.
Has he gone?
Yeah, he's gone. You've just caught me dabbing my lips as I finished the food that was delivered.
I will be back though.
Oh, to make your mind up.
I really wish you would. Andy, how are you?
I'm very well, sir. I'm doing okay. I've had a thoroughly enjoyable day. It's quite bizarre, isn't it? I would normally be entering an Indian restaurant in Shrewsbury by now to eat a nice curry and quaff a few beers, but this is very surreal. But nonetheless, still as enjoyable.
It has been quite odd in many ways. That, you know, sometimes you kind of stop suddenly during the day and think, what would I be doing now?
Yeah.
Under normal circumstances, you know, where would we be? What would we be doing? And it's quite a melancholy feeling in many ways. But I think we've tried to do.
Sorry, I haven't had to impose any major deadlines on you guys for models for Telford, so it's a bit of a.
Do you know what, Andy? Although this might sound like I'm making a rod for my own back, but I've kind of missed that.
I know, yeah.
I kind of, I kind of go back to a couple of years ago where you presented me with a Sheridan kit 2 weeks before Telford and said, "Can you build that?" And I kind of went, "Well, I'll give it a go." And then a week later, you said, "It's a week till Telford. Can I get a Spitfire to you overnight? Can you build it in a week?" And I'm like,
yeah.
Oh, but it was just for some reason. I don't deal with pressure terribly well, but that kind of pressure I really enjoyed because it really felt like I was achieving something and I had no time. But a lot of the decisions have been taken out of my hands as well. I couldn't, because it's a double-edged sword when you're building stuff for yourself and the hobby company, in that, you know, you're getting stuff often ahead of release, but you can't mess around with it. You know, you've got to be presenting what the box holds.
Yes.
Which kind of means that when we sort of get kits of our own for our own use, often we never get a chance to build them. So I've built 2 Tamiya Tomcats for the hobby company straight from the box, and I've got a pile of Tomcats that I've made plans for, but I've never been able to get around to building them.
That's right.
In fact, I have made a promise that over Christmas I'm going to build another Tamiya Tomcat as my Christmas project, but throw a lot of aftermarket at it just for the fun of doing it, because it's not for you. It's for me, so I can do what I want with it and see how it goes over Christmas. But I like that pressure. I don't know what Spencer feels about that.
I have to say, I haven't missed the pressure at all. I haven't missed having to hit a deadline, having to get stuff ready, I've kind of liked all of that. I jokingly said, and I'm not sure whether I'm really joking about this, that after doing these shows and sort of building for shows, certainly Scale Model World, for the last 30 odd years, and the sort of the constant repetition of the treadmill that leads up to the event, I very much enjoyed not having to do that this year.
About a year on.
Yeah, I think I got to a point where I almost needed a break from it. You know, that the year away from the shows has been good for my kind of psyche and my, you know, the sort of the general sort of attitude towards the gatherings at shows and that kind of thing. And so I feel that it's been an interesting sort of, this has been an interesting diversion. Although I said to John this morning, I actually prepared more for this morning than I did preparing for the show, because I had all sorts of research to do and all of those kind of things. But
it feels like it does. Everything about this weekend has felt like a properly planned event, which it was.
Yeah.
There's no, we did. There's a lot of planning, especially from, John's perspective, and I hate to him too much, but he's put an insane amount of planning into this to get it how it has, and it is running really well so far.
It's been good to see this come to fruition. When we met in the summer, Andy, we obviously came to you, didn't we, and had, tea and cake and everything, and we chatted outside on your front lawn during the midst of the. Is that better?
That's better.
John, is that better? Is that better? Yeah. Is it better?
No.
No. Still crackling.
Is it?
It's a little bit crackly, mate.
Everything's in. How's that?
It's not massively problematic, but there is a definite crackle that we've had before. Oh,
that's interesting.
But it's only while you're talking.
Well, that probably isn't good then. Well, in that case, what I'm going to do then is carry on. Oh, we should carry on.
Yeah.
All right, then we will. Yeah, I can hear that now. That's a bit annoying. Everything's in. How is that now?
No, it's no better.
No better. Listen, I'm going to leave.
Okay, there we go.
Sorry about that. I just temporarily removed him from the stream for a second there. It sounded like he was rustling a bag of crisps in front of his microphone. So I do apologise for that, everybody. A perfect day of broadcasting, and then we get to the end of the day, and the day started. We end the day with technical problems. So I do apologise. Please continue, gentlemen.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, I've quite enjoyed over the last few years the kind of pressure that that you've kind of loaded onto us at very, very short notice. It's been kind of fun because, without wanting to sound too arrogant, it makes you feel a bit important.
Well, I think the IPMS Scale Model Worlds as it is now is a very important show. I mean, it is the biggest model show in the world, and I think as far as we're concerned, as a PR exercise, it is the most important show that we attended because you are.
Actually, because you're not kind of if it's not done by this time, it's it's not a world-ending disaster, but there's no option but to get it done by this time.
That's right.
And I find that for somebody like me who doesn't really do pressure that well, this is a kind of fun pressure that I like. That kind of thing when you find yourself at 2 a.m. doing something because you need to get this finished is quite refreshing to me occasionally, because I don't generally do it. Spencer, on the other hand, has been exactly the opposite. He's been working with these kind of deadlines for decades. It's still fairly new to me, so it's still a novelty, if you like, to me to have a really, really tight deadline.
From our perspective, the interesting thing is these days is that if you'd have said to me or Italieri or indeed Svezda 10 years ago that it was Scale Model World or IPMS Nationals, call it what you want, and they said, we need some samples, they looked at you with a blank face and said, what is it? But the testimony of the show is that it is recognised now as being a major event, and I say all companies pull out the stops to.
Yeah, it's not just a major event for modelers; it's a major event for the trade in general.
Right.
It's where you quite often see new releases are first aired and announced and stuff like that. So I think, as much as like Spencer said, he could have done with a break. I think it's important that we don't underestimate the importance of it as an event. In the larger sense, and now everybody's in the same boat this year with everything being cancelled. So it's not like Scale Model World was cancelled and everything else is running. So everybody's in the same boat, unfortunately.
Can I just check that I sound right now? Is that
better? Yeah, you're fine. Yeah, that's yeah.
I think I mean the dealing with the pressure of it. I think the deadlines and all of that kind of thing. I think it's sometimes easy to forget how much pressure we put upon ourselves, and I think I've always said this to people when they talk about hobbyists who talk about wanting to make models professionally, and one of the things I always say is that once you sign on the dotted line, it's no longer a hobby. It's something that you have to take seriously. And deadlines, I can't do it quite as much as I used to be able to. But I used to be able to plan a model build almost to the minute. I would be able to say, this is going to take me exactly this amount of time. And I would be able to plan it and then know exactly on any given hour during any given day how long it was going to take, and I would be able to finish it off. And I never missed a dedeadline. I don't think I've ever missed a deadline in that sense. But there was a time leading up to Scale Model World where you would be doing 18-hour plus days and everything. And I tell a story about this, about leading up to a particular Scale Model World. I used to work for when I first moved back into Newport, which was 20 years ago. I was living on my own, and I ended up doing bespoke work for a guy who ran a company called the Showcase Company. And I would build his display models. And one particular year, I counted up how many models I built, bearing in mind I was editing for for a magazine as well at the same time, how many models I built in a particular 12-month block. I had them all listed down. I did 95.
Wow.
I did 95 models in one 12-month block of time. And I was chatting to him at Scale Model World, and he got all of the models all displayed out and all of that sort of stuff. And in one of the display cases was, I think it might have been made by Revell. Revell had done an articulated lorry that was a Ferrari racing truck, basically. So it was a red tractor unit, big trailer. It got Ferrari down the side of the trailer, and it was sat in this display case, big glass display case. And I was looking at the models. I could see all my dioramas and all that sort of stuff that I built. And I pointed at it and I said, "Oh man, that is absolutely gorgeous." And I was sort of thinking, "Oh yeah, that looks really nice. I think it looks nice in the display case and everything." And I said, "Yeah," I said, "Someone's done a really nice job on that." And Dennis, who I worked for at the time, he looked at me and he said, "Sorry." And I said, "You've got this model built. It looks great in the display case." And he said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, who built the Ferrari truck?" And he went, "You did." He said, that's your model. And I had literally no recollection that I'd built a 3-foot long, 24th scale Ferrari truck that he'd got in this display case. Couldn't remember putting it together. Couldn't remember putting it. And I said, "When did I build this?" He went, "You built it 6 months ago."
No way.
I built so many models that year.
That's a bit sort of hamster wheel, isn't it?
Yeah, I just got to the point where there was one the sort of straw that broke the camel's back over that period was that I remember getting up this one. He was picking some models up at the weekend, this particular weekend, and he got in touch with me. He said, I'll pick it up on Saturday, and I've got a few things to do. And I started work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I just sat at my workbench. 6 o'clock in the morning, and I carried on working until 2:30 the following morning. I had 2 hours sleep, and then I repeated the process. I did that for 3 days straight, and all I did was I looked at my workbench to complete his models, and he came and picked them up. And I got to the end of it. I'd done however many that is. What's that? Almost 60 hours. I think I did in 3 days, just building models. And by the end of it, I couldn't even see the workbench. I was so tired. And I was churning out something like, I was doing little 144 scale things for him as well, and B52s and B36s and all that kind of stuff. At one point, I was churning out 10 models a day for him. 10 models a day. And when you're in that position, I remember a good friend of mine, Derek Holmes, who sadly passed away almost 20 years ago. Actually, he passed away not long after Liz and I got together, and he used to paint toy soldiers. He was a sculptor, full-blown sculptor, brilliant sculptor as well. But before that, he worked for a company that made metal toy soldiers, like the kind of thing that Britons make, those kind of things. And he was saying to me that at one point he was painting 100 of those a day. Gosh. A day. Can you imagine that? And I said to him, "How did you manage to do that?" He said, "I got into a system where I was able to move really fast and be able to do all that really, really quickly." And although I not got to the point where I was building models that fast, and doing that many a day, that's exactly where I was. I got into a system that allowed me to do that. But I think as you get to our age, your ability to work to that level of speed and maintain the quality. Because if you give me a model and I say, right, well, I'm going to build this in 4 days, and I give it back to you and it looks like I've built it in 4 hours and it's rubbish, you're never going to give me anything again, and so we have to maintain a certain level of
yeah. I mean 20 years ago I was renowned for building models over the course of a weekend on some of the forums, and it would be out of the box on Friday, and then first thing Monday morning, the finished model would be photographed and presented.
Yeah.
And I would do that time after time after time after time. And people still make jokes about it now. People who knew me back then still make jokes about it, but I can't do it now.
No, I can't. I don't have the energy.
I don't have the ability to focus enough to do it now. I just get distracted and have to go and do something else.
But equally, Andy will know this because he gives gives us models to build, and that's almost irrelevant to the needs of a company, because if you've got a kit that comes in a week before, like you did with the Spitfire, which you did last year, if a kit comes in a week before Scale Model World, that's got to be built. It's got to be done, hasn't it? It can't be just ignored.
The remarkable thing is, when Andy sent me that first Spitfire and said, this is, and I remember it turned up on the Wednesday, and I had to be on my way up to John's the following Thursday. So it was literally 7 days before it had to be done. And I felt like I was just, I was putting in massive amounts of hours after work, getting it all done, and I got it all together. And I have to say, I thought it looked really nice. It was a really nice model. I finished it, and people have said it didn't look like it was a rushed build. So it was fine. But last year, because John had done one of the schemes, I'd done one of the other schemes, and Andy had said at some point, I need the third scheme doing. And so I had the kit. Andy sent me the kit, and I went, yeah, all right, I'll sort of knock that out at some point over the next couple of months. And one day I took it out of the box, and less than a week later, it was finished.
Yeah.
So in spite of there being no pressure to build it at that point, I guess you'd say it's a testament to Mia that even when there was no pressure and I just had to bimble through and finish it for the show in a couple of months' time, it still took less than a week.
One of the things that we've got Andy on now, and obviously he's sort of fundamental to the sort of running of the stand at Scale Model World and all of that sort of stuff. I'll come on, if it's okay, Andy, in a couple of minutes. I'll come on to that legacy series and sort of how that came about. But we've all, Drew, Jonathan, and I have all built models for the stand, and I've noticed over the last few years you've gone down that route more and more of having models on display within that sort of central section of the stand. Has that become more and more important to the hobby company to have those models built up and on display rather than just having the kits? Is it something that you actively are now trying to push in order to show how the models look?
Well, ultimately it is. The stand has evolved as the show has evolved. I think is the best way I could describe it. I mean, I got involved soon after I joined the hobby company, and obviously I'd ran IPMS with Airfix with Trevor Snowden for many years, so I had a good background knowledge of what made things tick. I mean, you mentioned what you previously said about building models. I mean, one of my memories of doing IPMS as it was then with Trevor was that he put an enormous amount of hours into the show beforehand, making kits, and then he used to do what he called a throughie. He used to sit up all night in the hotel bar and drink beer till 6 o'clock in the morning. And that was part of the culture of IPMS at the time. It's wonderful. How the guy got by with so little sleep, I don't know. But digressing,
isn't it? When we were young.
I'm sure he won't mind me saying that, but I mean, it is part of, I think, the heritage and culture of IPMS. But Jonathan will know because he sat there with me on many occasions. But digressing away, to answer your question, it is important because I think kits have come on themselves so much in recent years. You reviewed the Tornado today. I noticed a lot of comments there about it. I did a very analytical review on it. Drew's done the same, and Jess done the same with the Hercules. But I think if you look at some of the schemes as well, more importantly, they are so eye-catching. And I think to see the finished model there, it does, I think, inspire the modeler, perhaps to go out and buy it, hopefully. So, for us, particularly with the wider space we have at the front with the tables, you need impact.
I kind of like to think, Andy, if your boss Pete wasn't happy with it, it wouldn't happen.
As I say, that goes back to Mr. Tamir in Japan. It goes back to Italy. It goes back to Zvezda. I mean, we had Zvezda people there last year, as you well know, because I introduced them to you.
Yeah, we met them, didn't we?
They recognise the importance of the show now. It's come onto their radar, so they came across to have a look what it was all about. And obviously at the time they were planning the Hercules. We were aware of it, so I think it just gave them some more background information. So I think in terms of who is prepared to travel from the four corners of the world to attend Scale Model World, it's second to none.
Yeah. One of the things as well that, I mean, you've just sort of touched on it now, is the hobby company have always been. I've worked in this industry now for thick under 30 years, so it's always been sort of my kind of bread and butter as part of my job. But it's nice for you to recognise that when we do these kit reviews, we are approaching it in a sort of an analytical way.
Yeah.
Drew and Jen both did that with the Hercules, and we got a good sense of what that kit was like. I hope I did the same thing with the Tornado today. I think it is important. I guess it's important for you to have sort of to have voices within the industry that are going to look at these kits. But I hope it's also important for you to have voices in the industry that are going to look at them properly and not just be there to say that something's great and how brilliant, you know, and it be an advertorial for you. Is that something that you always bear in mind? You know, when it comes to these kind of assessments.
Absolutely, and as I would expect no less. We are there as a business, even though we're only a distributor, but we are there as the face of Tamir and the face of Italieri and Dragon and Zvezda. You know, we take the praise as well as the negative on board, and it does get fed back. You know, most people think it doesn't, but I mean, I've got a book today which I've been making notes from. You know, look at some of the comments as they appear down the right hand side.
Yeah.
You know, it does get fed back, and I say we can influence what is done at the other end of the chain. But I think what it also does
kind of lays to rest the perennial complaint that companies don't listen, doesn't it?
Absolutely, completely. I mean, we don't stand there and ignore people. We actively talk to people and find out what really makes their floats their boat. But I think what it also does for me is it challenges other companies to become better. So I think in many respects, let's agree that Tamir are top of the pile in terms of their reputation and heritage. But I think if you look at the advancement of Zvezda over the last 5-10 years,
Zvezda since about 2011, I would suggest, Zvezda have rapidly risen to, you know, in the top 5.
Yeah.
I'm slightly concerned that Andy has a list and names are going on it. So, just going to say a quick thing, Andy. I know you're a bit time short tonight. Can you hang on for another 5 minutes, or do you want to come back and do another show another time?
As Mike's not being inconvenienced in America, that's fine.
That's fine. Okay then.
One thing I'd like to say, John, before Andy does go, I've sort of said this to Andy sort of online, but I'd like to say this as well. Andy, I'd like to thank you publicly. There's plenty of people who are watching this, but I'd like to thank you publicly for the support that you've not only given Interesting Modelling Co. over the sort of the lockdown period and being there to help us out. I'd like to thank you personally as well for the help and support you've given me during the projects that have run through the summer. You've been extraordinarily patient and generous in supplying what I've needed for those projects at a time that was pretty difficult for all of us to deal with and legislate for. So you know, I very much appreciate what you've done for me personally. I very much appreciate what you've done in terms of the sort of the product support. And if you could pass those thanks on as well to Pete Binger. I know that he's sort of been keeping up to date with that series and those projects. It means a great deal to me that you've taken time to do that. And I know we do communicate and we keep in touch and everything. But I think a very public thank you from me personally, I'm sure from the other guys as well, for the support that you personally and also the hobby company have given all of us over the last 6 months.
I think it's safe to say that this weekend could not have happened without the hobby company and Andy's input into it.
Absolutely not. No,
there's no way it could have. There's no way it could have happened. Well, I would have had nothing to talk about for a start, would I? You know, I wouldn't have had I could have spent an hour talking about the kit I'm building, which is being built for Andy and the hobby company.
I think it's sometimes worth giving out thanks because
absolutely
people will realize that, but modelers will also understand as well as you know, we don't operate in a vacuum without the support around us. we can't do our jobs. But equally, that, like I've just touched on, that doesn't mean that we're going to be glossing over issues. That's not the case at all. And anybody that sort of listened to my broadcast earlier on about the tornado will know that that's absolutely not the case. But I think it's worthwhile from all of us giving you thank you for the help and support.
You're very kind, and it's not a problem to say there's a mutual benefit at the end of the day. But I think a day like today, where you can see, the enthusiasm of the people who have participated, and I think if it grows a hobby, then we've all got a future, which is what it's all about at the end of the day in a very troublesome world. So long may it continue.
I thank Andy in chutney. So
I thank Andy by sending him text messages saying, "Can you send me some matte black?"
Yeah,
I've got 60 jars of the thing this year, so everybody's not only going to get big jars, but they're going to get double quantities.
And I generally thank Andy by responding to his messages. But sorry, mate, I'm on late today. Can you at the side of the house?
Yes. I wonder, Andy, before you go, touching on the legacy build, and I was listening to what John was saying about the Panzer II. Obviously, that top 5 was the inspiration, wasn't it, for the original sort of legacy series? Panther, Chieftain, Panzer II, Hanomag, and the Flak 36, 37, I think, are the top 5.
Right.
You obviously have great affection for these older kits, and other than the sort of the fact that they are nice kits to put together and everything, do you think they're a good gateway for modelers, and is that one of the reasons why they're so popular, do you think?
Well, yes, I do, but I think my inspiration is reading. What is he doing?
He's doing his nails live.
I'm not. I'm building a model. Get on, look.
I was just doing exactly the same. I was going. I'm sat here going, look at the screen.
Festival of modelling. I'm getting on with some modelling. If you want,
it's like percussion.
Right, don't make me. I'll recuse myself then.
I think to answer your question, the models have stood the test of time, but having read and being privileged to meet him on more than one occasion, but having read his autobiography, what I would recommend is to read Mr. Timmier's autobiography.
Yeah, it's very good.
Understand his passion and what drove him in the early days to create and want to be the best in the world. And I think when you understand his passion about developing models and how he has done over the years, how Timmier continue to thrive by doing, look at Mosquito, you look at Tomcat, you look at Spitfire, how they've evolved the art of plastic kit modelling. When you understand his belief and passion, then you can see why the kits have lasted so long in the range. And it's a great privilege to work for a man who's just seeks perfection all the time. So it's a great legacy to have.
And we forget, don't we, that essentially the plastic side of Timmier's business is the sort of is kind of smaller than the other thing. I mean, RC and everything. And when people say, "Oh well, Timmier have only released 2 aircraft kits this year," you forget that they've probably spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on radio-controlled cars. 57
other projects this year.
Yeah.
I think the thing with Timmier is that what people may not recognise is that they are a completely one-dimensional business. They do everything. They do their own. They print their own boxes. Nothing is subcontracted other than the paint factory is external, but everything else they do themselves. So the boxes they print themselves digitally, the outer boxes they print themselves digitally. It's just a one in-house business, and it's a fantastic thing. But to answer your question, it's what Matt alluded to earlier on with Airfix. There's only so much money they have to invest, and they have to decide where that money goes best. And it goes between radio control, it goes between plastic kits, and there's a thriving youngsters scene in Japan. Little 4x4 mini cars, which we don't import anymore, but they are cult status in Japan.
I mean, they sell by the hundreds. The millions, don't they?
Yeah.
Those little.
Absolutely.
But I think that largely, Andy, that explains why Tamiya are so consistently excellent, because they have control of every single thing that they do. So there's no dealing with a supplier that hasn't done what you asked in terms of a tooling, or hasn't quite printed the decals how you asked them to, anything like that. They have absolute 100% control of every part of the process, which means that when they refine something and you get kits that are as refined as Tamiya kits tend to be, there's a reason for that. And that is because they have had absolute control over every part of the process.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I'm just going to say, I think we're going to have to let Andy go, unfortunately, because we originally were only going to eat up half an hour of his time, and we've actually now grabbed him for nearly an hour. And I'm sure he probably wants to go and watch some television and drink his Vino Red. So, Andy, we will have you on another time, and that gives us a chance to go into depth on some other things as well. So really do appreciate your time for coming to talk to us all tonight. And obviously, you know, as these two jokers have said, we do appreciate the support and everything you've given us down the years on various projects. And I can't wait for when we're all back at Telford arguing amongst each other again, which will be absolutely splendid.
So I'm thinking more along the lines of popping down to your neck of the woods for cake and tea. To be honest, I'm not going to wait until November next year.
Yeah, I mean the Blitz tea rooms need another visit.
The Blitz tea rooms, yeah, we can have chocolate cake and tea out of china cups.
Yeah, I'm actually at this point. I am just going to give a plug to the Blitz Tea Rooms in Weston-super-Mare, which is an excellent cafe. So AF, I think as soon as the Blitz actually reopens in December, I think you and I are going to go there for a cup of tea and a slice of red velvet, I think. Anyway.
But thank you for having me on as part of the weekend. It's been thoroughly enjoyable.
No, we really appreciate you taking the time out, AF. And we will, I'll chat to you during the week anyway, but we will definitely have you back on the show again. So from all of us, thanks for your time, Andy, and we'll definitely see you again.
Take care, Andy.
Yes, bye.
Okay, take care. Bye. Absolutely. Who was he again?
Doesn't he work in the fire escape trade?
Yeah, he does work in the fire escape trade. Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Who's the next victim?
Who's the next victim? Well,
I thought we were very nice to him.
You were on your best behaviour.
We were,
very
absolutely.
Good. Very good. I can't believe that I'm actually building a model being distributed by the hobby company on a festival of modelling, and I get told off by a representative of the hobby company for sitting here and actually building one of their products.
I could have sworn you were doing your nails. It looked like you were doing this.
Look, these tiny little return rollers for the Samaventi. They're very, very. I was here, but I was just kind of like cleaning up the. Unbelievable.
I particularly like the fact that I completely got away, because I was doing exactly the same at one point. And
yes, but yours didn't sound like you were shaking maracas.
Hey.
And I've not had any beer yet.
No, neither have I actually.
Which is extraordinarily disappointing.
And actually, can you see tonight, we've got a bit of a theme, because I've got my lovely Emma Bridgewater Apollo landing mug that my friend Pitt bought me for my birthday. And I also have my lovely NASA T-shirt. Look at this. Look, it's absolutely fabulous. My lovely NASA T-shirt my friend Laura bought for me. So, you know, it's a bit of a NASA thing. Anyway, we're going to complete this. We're going to complete our tribute to the Americas now by bringing in a special guest live across the transatlantic via the wonders of the interweb, and it is none other than, you saw him last night, he's back again by popular request, so he says. It's Mr. Mike Reeves. Good evening, Michael.
See, Mike, we'll see
I'm on.
So you've got beer. I've got no beer.
No, no, no. In fact, I'm going to leave you three to argue amongst each other, and I will be back. I'm actually going to shut this down at 9 o'clock tonight, so you got half an hour. Gentlemen, fill your boot.
Do I have to keep these two under control? Am I the arbiter between these two?
No, there's no, because Mike and I have both got beer, so we're perfect.
No, so you're all right then. I think actually it might be worth, because I did mention this last night, I think it might be worth carrying on the conversation we were having last night about prototypes, huh? And
anything you want to talk about, I'm in.
And go down similar routes, unless you want to talk about something else that
This is your show, gents. I'm just here to play along and
I know, Mike, you're here now, so
friends.
you show as well.
Yes, you are actually a driver for the.
If I can say one thing, number one, today has been absolutely brilliant by everybody involved. Certainly enjoyed the demos and all the chatter and fun stuff, and of course hearing and seeing Andy Farmer just now is really cool. Definite one of those guys. It's an icon in the business, and certainly cheers to you, Andy. You didn't have to. I told Jonathan because Andy mentioned that Mike's waiting, and I'm like, I don't care. Keep going. This is I was here last night. I think I'm the only double bill for the
So
weekend.
far, you are, well, apart from us, obviously.
You guys are the bill.
We've got to be invited, I guess.
Yeah, we own the company.
Right.
No, trust me, you really don't need to be invited. But please carry on, gentlemen, because this is lurking in the background. So
one thing worth bearing in mind is that the producer is watching this all the way through. So
there is that. I think it's fairly safe to say, Mike, at this point, that you are pretty much our transatlantic link. So
you are indeed.
I really appreciate that, and for me.
You're not yet in the band, but you're guesting. So
you're the stand-in guitarist. That's,
I'm the rhythm guitar player.
You're the rhythm guitarist.
I am the Gilby Clark to Izzy Stradlin. I get it.
Yes, indeed.
But promotion is in the wings, so
Yeah. We mentioned prototypes last night and everything like that. I think an interesting sort of add-on to that conversation that we had, and I think both of you might sort of be able to chime in on this, is kits. We sort of mentioned this about the AV8B, didn't we? The prototypes, and we went down that route last night. Kits that haven't really been created of subjects that are sort of are important or have only been created almost in passing, really. And there are kind of lots of those. Drew is in seventh heaven at the moment because pretty much models of it are covering all of the bases for him. They're doing Mirage 4000s, they're doing Mirage G8s, they're doing all of those kind of things. But there's got to be lots of other subjects that go and certainly obviously we get like European aircraft subjects, but there must be quite a few in America that have sort of been missed off as well that you'd like to see.
Well, we brought it up last night during our conversation. I think the American AV8B, which, by the way, thanks for such a great airplane, gentlemen.
Yeah, thanks for still flying it when we don't have any.
We got all your GR9s though,
only for spares.
And in fairness,
the A10 is a big one to me. But what bothers me is you don't have that, like we even touched on this last night, the YF-17, the YF-17 Cobra, but yet we have a YF-23, which wasn't even it was basically a full-scale development airplane no, I love it. Don't get me wrong. But
yes, EAP. It's like a
here we go. Here we go. You're starting already, huh? Okay.
Here we are.
No, and I would like to see even some earlier kind of airplanes.
If you ask me, the subjects, if you said 3 subjects, American subjects that only ever were prototypes that you want to see. The A9.
Yeah.
I would love to see a kit of that. The AH-56 Cheyenne.
The Cheyenne is amazingly beautiful.
Yeah, I would absolutely. And, I'm even prepared to go. I would love to see a 48 scale kit of that, not just a 72nd scale kit of the Cheyenne. Sure. And the YUH-61, the aircraft that competed with the Black Hawk.
Oh yeah. I actually forgot about that.
With the tricycle undercarriage, I think Boeing had built an absolutely beautiful helicopter there. Certainly, I always found it far more attractive than the Black Hawk. And I would love to see a kit of that. But the thing is, generally speaking, in the United States, traditionally there were competitions, and 2 aircraft were built and flown, and then a winner was picked. Europe didn't tend to have that.
Well, in Europe, if I'm not mistaken, and I mean, since post Harrier, it's really been a consortium of nations. I mean, you got the Tornado, you got the Eurofighter, which is a sore subject with us. But you guys have tended to work in league with other nations, knowing that you all are going to buy it.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that it's almost like, the United States is 50 states. It's 50 individual states, so you still end up with competition. Europe is 20 whatever states at the moment, 28, shortly to be 27, but that's another argument. But but most of our competition remains on paper until a winner's picked.
Yeah,
right.
And those aircraft,
the United States will actually pick contractors who then go on and build, the YH-63 and the YH-64, the YC-14, the YC-15.
Oh, YC-14, YC-15. I actually saw them at FEMA
as well.
back when they had them, and because that was going to be the replacement for the C-130.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and both of them failed.
Both subjects that we'd all like to see kits of.
The other thing that's interesting
is a prototype in 48 scale of the F-4 Phantom.
Yes, that would be good too. When you see these aircraft as well, that often American designs change radically in terms of once they get into production. The Raptor, for instance, was a completely different aircraft once it won the competition.
But I think
British aircraft, sorry, Drew, British aircraft such as the Tornado, essentially the prototype Tornado looks like a GR4. It's essentially not changed. There are details, modifications in terms of internal systems, that kind of thing, but essentially there's very little difference.
The shape is there
between the prototype 01 and the GR4.
But I think that's largely a product, again, of, like I say, generally speaking, competition in Europe is sorted at the paperwork stage, if you like. You see a lot of
the money stage.
You see a lot of artists' impressions of what an aircraft will look like. If you look at early artists' impressions of the Hawk, they're wildly different from what actually flew in 1974, was it? The Hawk first flew. And in fairness to the US, both the YF-22, the YF-23, the X-32 and the X-35, none of those were prototypes.
Right.
They were all technology demonstrators intended to lead to another aircraft. So there was never any intention that the actual production aircraft would look anything like, other than in general layout.
I think you can go even further back with that, Drew. I mean, you look at the YF-17 and the F-16. They were both much smaller than not much smaller than the F-16 size, but the Cobra was much smaller than what the Hornet ended up being. But general shapes were there, and I absolutely agree with that. It's very interesting to see the progress, and I know a lot of people are not fans of the F-35. For now, looking back at the budget overruns and blah blah blah, we can get into the political money crap later on. But when you look at the nuts and bolts of what that airplane is capable of, now,
I think I've said
compared to what they had hoped it would do, they are asking a lot more out of an airplane, not just a pilot, the airplane itself, than any other airplane in the history of airplanes.
I think did we have this discussion a couple of weeks ago, Spencer, on here about the F-35, where I said essentially at the moment, if you're looking for a new fighter aircraft and you are allowed to purchase the F-35, I can't see any reason to pick anything else.
No.
currently.
No.
If you are sufficiently friendly to the builders and you are allowed to you're allowed to obtain that level of technology, I can't see any substantial argument to pick anything else over the F-35 at the moment.
Yeah.
I could say this, just knowing some friends of mine that are former Viper drivers, F-16 guys that have transitioned to the F-35, and they'll tell you right now, night and day. The airplane is far more capable than what the media says, and the media is always going to tell you it's not as capable, it's costing too much money, blah 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 blah. But the real people that have to employ the weapon and use it in anger if needed are already saying it is quite possibly the most technologically advanced and high performance airplane in the world.
I mean,
next to what I would say the F-22 is.
I think we saw that a couple of years ago when they finally opened the flight envelope up fully, didn't we? And we saw the first demonstration flights. Was it 2018? They really unlocked. They went to the Block 4 software, and it just then you suddenly went, oh. Because I'd spent a lot of years thinking every time I saw the F-35 doing a demo, it spent an awful lot of time in Afterburner, and I'm thinking, has this really got the performance, or is it just trying to brute it round to make it look good? And then we saw that demonstration in 2018, and I kind of went, oh.
I remember there was a video that you were purring over a video that was posted. This thing was slipping and sliding all over the place. I think in terms of subjects for models, part of the reason why modelers have not really hooked into the F-35. I like it. I think it's a good shape. But why modelers have not really hooked into it is because of essentially the paintwork more than the shape of it. Because it's a really boring color scheme, but also it's difficult to recreate the way that the original thing looks. And that's
isn't it?
I remember painting that 48 scale F-22. That thing took 50 hours to paint, and it was in 2 shades of grey because of the metallic finish that was on it. So trying to recreate that is difficult. I think Drew's just touched on it, and I think you touched on it as well. Touched on something similar earlier on. Drew mentioned the Hawk, and you mentioned the A-10. I still think that in terms of 72nd scale and 48 scale, we are still in a position where we need cutting edge kits of both of those aircraft. We don't have a good kit of the Hawk, as far as I'm aware, extant. The Airfix kit is kind of okay. It's kind of okay. The Fujimi kit is kind of okay if you can get hold of it, but we don't have a really good Hawk kit. Some of them have got the nose wrong, and it's the same with the A-10. The A-10, we've got the Italeri kit, and we've got Hasegawa's kit, and we've got, I think, Academy's kit. But we could do with really nice kits of both of those aircraft.
I think it's the march of time as well, though, isn't it? Because I always regarded the Italeri A-10 is a superb model. The 72nd one is actually one of Italeri's the finest 72nd scale kits Italeri have ever done. But it's nearly 30 years old.
Yeah,
right.
It's time. It's time for somebody to step up and do as much as we discussed, liking the 70s schemes and all the rest of it. It's time for somebody to step up and do a 2020 A-10 in 48 scale and 72nd scale. I would argue.
Yeah. And they could do an early and a late one. I mean, we need an A, we need an early A, and then with the A-10, and we need a C model. Yeah, which doesn't have a whole lot of internal difference in cockpit differences. You got the SATCOM antenna, you got the big football, the TV antenna on top that looks funny. But I will say this: I think the Hawk is maybe one of the sexiest airplanes ever built. I truly, truly do, and I'm good friends, and you guys have probably seen my T-45 stuff that Gabe and Selly. Gabe flew and designed both of the 100th anniversary, the centennial of naval aviation schemes while he was still active duty in Texas. And his last cross-country flight, he flew out here to visit me for the weekend. in one of those Centennial schemes. I got to dig up pictures and show them to you. But when you get up close to a hawk, because Americans, we don't see them. You just don't see them.
No.
It's a bigger airplane than what you think it is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Because it looks tiny in pictures, but it's not a small airplane.
I mean, Revell have obviously done the 32nd scale kit, which is a really nice kit. But
I have the Red Arrows one.
Yeah, the Hawk is elusively shapely when you see it. And I remember when I built the 48 scale Italeri kit, the nose was so out on it. And then you've sort of, I think Airfix then did a newer version. And even that didn't completely capture it. John mentioned earlier when we were doing the Tornado review that if the nose cone of a Tornado is not correct, it throws everything else out. The whole lot. You may as well just give up on it. And as lovely as the Hasegawa 72nd scale Tornado is, that nose destroys everything.
It's the same with their Sea Harrier, isn't it? The Sea Harrier nose completely.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it is odd that we don't have that. They're so widely used as well. The Goshawk is a good example. You've got Kinetics. Is it the Kinetic Goshawk?
Yeah.
The 48?
Yeah, which was the original 2 Bob's release.
Yeah.
That Kinetic did for Bob, and then once he sold out of them, Raymond Chung said, "Well, do you mind if I go ahead and produce them on my own?"
Yeah.
And then you have Special Hobby with the 32nd. Did Special Hobby do the 32nd scale T? No, it was a T2. I'm sorry. It was the Buckeye that Bob also did.
Yeah.
In terms of major mainstream manufacturers, Kinetic's T45 is it for the T45.
Yeah.
And it fits where it touches.
And that's an aircraft that was it nearly 300 of them were built.
Yeah.
So it's not it's not a limited run in real life. It might have only had one user. But I mean they've put a lot of French pilots through there as well, haven't they?
Absolutely, and you think about the markings choices because it's Navy.
Yeah,
there's gajillions of markings.
It's kind of a bit of a mystery why the Goshawk hasn't been better served. It would certainly be one that I would like to see better done.
Well, and frankly, I think going kind of backtracking to the A10. I'm sorry, I keep doing the Jedi mind trick to everybody.
It's actually making me feel quite relaxed.
Well, that's the purpose, Spencer. I think going back to the A10, I almost would hope, with the way Kinetic is going right now, I think that would be a perfect subject for them to tackle. Keep the cost down because Kinetic kits tend to be a little bit on the leaner side cost wise. Or God, if Tamiya did it, you wouldn't see me again. I'd have 400 A10s in the case back here. But I don't think Tamiya. I'm not thinking that's going to be their bag. I'm actually thinking Tamiya may do an F-35 since Japan flies them. But I think if Kinetic could pull off the A10 like they have done in recent kits, as long as the shape is there, their surface detail is getting much better. Their shape has actually been good other than the F-16, which was, I think, one of the very first things they did.
Yeah. The F-16 was the second kit they did after the F-84, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Raymond's really putting a lot of money into it. And so hopefully, the Hornet, middle of the road, I still prefer the Hasegawa Hornet just because of the plastic, and the less complicated nose area, which Kinetic is trying to do so many different variations, and I certainly appreciate that. But Hasegawa, is that company dead, by the way?
Hasegawa?
No, they're deviating and going down different paths, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they're very much they're doing now what Fujimi did in the early 90s, in the early mid 90s. They're really drawing back to their home market and focusing on that. And there's the occasional release, which is more aimed at the international market. I think you'll probably see a 72nd scale F-35C from them in the next couple of years. as deliveries to the US Marines now and the US Navy start ramping up with the F-35C. But they're really drawing back down to the home market. I think people quite miss the point that financially and economically, Japan has been in not a very good way for a couple of decades now. People tend to think of Japan as being a very rich, developed country, but economically, they've been in a really bad place for a couple of decades.
Well, I think China's stolen a lot of their export, and on top of that, then you had the tsunami and the whole Fukushima issue. So that really devastated their economy. Much like, I think, and let's not get political or anything like that, much like COVID-19 has done worldwide.
Yes.
So, but that said, segue, what about helicopters? When are we going to get some good 48 scale, really quality Blackhawks, good AH-1s?
Yeah.
Some Cobras.
I completely agree with you. The lack at this point of even the Seahawk, the Black Hawk and the Seahawk really need to be done in 48 scale and done properly by a large concern who has the interest and the financing to do a decent job of it. I don't get how the Black Hawk hasn't been done in a world class, a truly modern world class kit.
Really, the only one's Academy, right, in 48 scale?
I think Italy have done one as well.
Yeah, they've done one.
Detail and all this kind of thing, but it is the modern H1. It is the modern Huey. Everybody buys it. Everybody uses it, and it still hasn't been, properly done in 48 scale, or really 72nd scale for that matter.
And also, the problem with helicopters when you get them, and there was a 48 scale Huey that came out not long ago, is that despite modern molding technology and modern detailing technology, they still kind of go down the route of making them smooth. And it's almost like we could do with a company taking the bull by the horns and saying, right, we're going to do a range of helicopters, but what we're going to do is we're going to create hybrid detailing. We're going to do the panel lines as a modern kit. We're going to do all the riveting as Airfix did in the 1960s. So that you get that look of a real helicopter, because that was certainly something that was widely criticised when that UH-1 came out. That it was super smooth.
Yeah,
I think Airfix actually pulled it off with the Lynx.
The Lynx, exactly.
I have one, which I've got back there in the case.
I've got two there.
Jamie Hago would be mad at me. Although I just joked with him for a few times that I was going to paint the windows on top clear orange or
blue. He gets quite aerated about the idea of those.
It's quite funny how exercised he gets about that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, we're talking about helicopters. What about Sea King?
Sea King.
What about
how about a Wasp or an Alouette or a Gazelle? I mean,
what about a Puma? Can we please have a Puma? I mean,
thank you.
We've got the Matchbox 32nd scale kit, a Hella 50th scale Puma, I think. We've got the Airfix 72nd scale kit, which is almost as old as I am. Is that it?
Which is old, by the way.
It is ancient. I mean, we're talking about molds made out of molten lava. So yeah, I mean, those sort of kits, a Bell 47, cutting edge Bell 47.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we had the old Revell the Mash kit in 32nd scale. I remember that with the Jeep and the little hut.
Didn't Italy do 47 a while back?
Yeah, they did. They did a 72nd scale one
with 32nd scale tail section.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody did one with.
I will say, I mean, tip of the cap to Kitty Hawk for doing helicopters in 35th scale, but honestly, who has room for the rotors?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I looked at the things like an academy with the CH53E, and the KV1 or CH46. Academy have had a little look at it, but again, as soon as you start getting to medium-sized helicopters in 48 scale, they take up a lot of real estate. They really
Absolutely,
do.
even an Apache.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's a big helicopter. And I mean, people say, the Apache and the Chinook are about the same length. The fuselage of both is about the same length, but they're wildly different in terms of the real estate. A 48 scale, Chinook is a big helicopter when you've got the rotors on and all the rest of it.
Certainly talking to manufacturers, I've spoken to Airfix about this, and the implication when you chat to manufacturers is the market's just not there in the same way. It's
I agree.
And as much as the world is missing a lot of these kits and a lot of these subjects, the tooling costs are almost not reaped back by the sales because they are so niche.
They're the kind of subjects that a company has to think of as making its money back over the long term rather than on a first production run, and that brings a whole slew of business problems, doesn't it? In that you then have to justify it to the board and the investors and all that kind of stuff. On the other hand, what you tend to find is quite often helicopters that do go into kit ranges stay in them.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Sky Crane.
Yeah, we mentioned this the other night.
We had this discussion last week as well, didn't we, about the Sky Crane?
We did, yeah. We mentioned about the Sky Crane, and it's there's, as far as I'm aware, there's like one kit, isn't there? There's the Revell kit, and that's pretty much.
There was an Aurora one,
Aurora. It's the old Aurora kit, if I'm not mistaken, right, Drew?
Yeah. And yet there was a time in the sort of the early 80s when Eschi were at their zenith. They were producing helicopter kits like they were going out of fashion in both.
The AB205.
Yeah.
The UH1/205 is a beautiful model.
Yeah, I mean the jet.
Italeri do basically constantly releasing helicopters, aren't they?
Yeah,
they are always, OH58s, Hughes 500, AH6s, 101s, all these Super Pumas. Now it's Italeri, so quite often they're not quite what you want from them because they're not, it's like the Super Puma is a bit of a hybrid and stuff like that. But at least they're doing the subjects,
right?
And Revell have been quite active in helicopters over the last 20 years.
Over in the States, Mike, are those kind of subjects popular? I mean, we go to shows obviously in the UK, and you don't see a huge number of helicopters built up at shows.
I think helicopters, Spencer, to your point, which I absolutely agree with. I almost think they're the forgotten flying machines, if you will, in a lot of cases, other than the super popular, the Huey, the Apache, as Drew alluded to, the Black Hawk, the Cobra. I mean, the Cobra is a nice helicopter. In the States, I don't think I have seen a foreign helicopter, a European, NATO, even maybe a Hind here and there, which usually ends up being a 35th scale trumper kit. You don't see very many of them on display anywhere. I mean, it's really kind of tragic. But I think that the subject matter is, it's like Drew said, it's almost a niche subject. Very much. I would even pigeonhole Wingnut Wings into the World War I stuff. Had they moved around and done some other things, and maybe done some French airplanes.
Yes, yeah,
maybe, and not doing giant German flying boats. Maybe Peter Jackson, instead of using his desire to create bigger and cooler, and actually thought about, we could actually do some Newports and things like that. It is really a closed wall, and I guess almost in any genre. You can use armor, you can use airplanes, you can use a certain era of 1950s jets. How many were there? Is it a niche subject? Sure, but the problem I think that you run into is the limited scope of interest, which, I think in this day and age,
you will tend to see more helicopters around than you ever do fixed wing aircraft in real life.
Yes,
sure.
Ironically.
I mean, given that I work in a factory that's 200 yards away from me that makes helicopters, perhaps that's an obvious thing for me to say. But you go anywhere in the country and you're far more likely to see, it's still even today, a Jet Ranger or an EC-135, something like that. You're far more likely to see one of those buzzing around than any fixed wing aircraft at any time.
Oh.
So
yeah, look at any news station, anybody that flies A-stars or twin stars for local rescue and things like that. I mean, all these companies and the government services for at least in the United States, a lot of helicopters are employed in our our Bureau of Land Management for fire protection and things like that. I think on a modeling scale,
every sheriff's department in the US has got a couple of helicopters at least.
I've got an airport 4 miles away, and we talked about it last night, I believe, with the Heinz coming in.
Yeah.
That's something that I've never seen fly in my life until last week, and I was absolutely enamored. Now I kind of want to go find a trumpeter.
I think the hind kind of sticks out because I remember the first time I saw one flying, and you've seen it in all through your childhood in the news from Afghanistan and in the 80s and all that. It was on the news quite often, but the first time you saw one flying and it hovered and turned towards you, and you went, "Whoa!"
And it's got that little kind of nose down.
That's a helicopter with a right end and a wrong end, and you don't want to be on the wrong end. It was
right.
I mean, going from the helicopters, you talked about the airport there. That leads you onto another path as well, doesn't it? We get a lot of airline models. A lot of airliners are released. Vesda in particular and Revell are very keen to produce airline kits, and Vesda's airline kits, Drew's built a couple this year, are superb. But so we get airliners. How many light civilian aircraft, can you name as kits? We've had the odd Cessna here or there, and we've had very limited run aircraft. But when you're talking about a Cessna 152 or 172, which were made in hundreds of thousands of examples, those things, chances are, if you live anywhere, the majority of things that fly over you are, like you say, are either helicopters or light aircraft. And yet, if you want to model those, it's a bust.
Absolutely. I mean, could you imagine how many people would build King Airs?
I love the King Air.
Beechcraft, Bonanzas. You look at some of the Cessna citations, a Gulfstream. Could you imagine having the Gulfstream family in 72nd scale? From the G1 to the G6, and just being able it's such a beautiful company. Falcon, Challenger. I mean, you can the list just goes.
And the King Air is a good example of that. It has military and civilian uses, and so so it's the Learjet as well. I picked up a Hasegawa Learjet 48 scale one, and I bought a Caracal decal sheet for it as well to make a US Air Force one. So those sort of kits. But we've got a little airfield up the road from us, a place called Slape, which was a bomber base during the Second World War. So it's got all the concrete runways and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
Occasionally, I'll go up there just to have a cup of tea and watch the world go by. And then you get all these very esoteric, kind of eclectic civilian aircraft coming in there. And you think, oh man, they're brilliant. So, Piper Cubs coming in. And you're like, why haven't we got a Piper Cub?
Love that. Didn't Revell do a 32nd scale one?
They did. But have we got I think Heller might have done a 48
you
scale.
Can go on YouTube and lose yourself in Piper Cub bush flying.
Exactly, with the big wheels.
But the problem is, I hate to be too sort of a downbeat on the human condition, but we like war and things that go whiz bang.
Agreed.
At the end of the day,
Absolutely agreed.
we like.
John, you're not shutting us down. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. He's not even listening. He's got his headphones figuring out.
So, all right, quick vox pop amongst you guys. What is the most important helicopter in history?
UH-1 Huey.
Sea King.
I win.
I think it's the UH-1 as well.
No. It's the HIP. It's the Milmi 8.
No one cares
Yes,
about the Russians.
Because it's used by so many operators.
It's the Milmi 8. This was prompted because we were talking about helicopters, and there was a one of those Discovery top 10 programs, and I can remember it was top 10 helicopters in terms of their importance to the world, and I could see them counting down and getting towards. And they're going to say it's the H1, and they're going to say it's the Huey, and I was just thinking it's not. It's the HIP. It's undoubtedly the HIP. It made more than they made H1s, and it had more operators. And
I think it should be that little hoodlum thing with the
the Karmov 26.
Drew, my argument would be just one word: Vietnam. The Huey is iconic because of its importance during that. I would even put the Bell 7 right after it from Korea.
It put the helicopter on the map. But I would still argue that in terms of importance to world development and its geopolitical impact, the HIP is more important.
Yeah,
but you didn't bring that up. You just said what was the most important, but you didn't qualify. I would say in that respect, the AH-64 Apache is the most important helicopter ever for geopolitical
not wrong
winning.
He's not wrong. He's
right. I'm afraid you're all wrong, because essentially this is the helicopter that most people this is probably the helicopter that almost everybody in the world saw at some stage. So no, we're not having any
that was the kit I was talking about.
Actually, Jonathan, that's a great point.
Yeah, I think if you asked everybody to kind of come up with a helicopter and say, "Can you name a helicopter?" Most people, I mean, that's one of the earlier missions. But
I'm going to disagree with that, John. I'm going to say if you ask people to name a helicopter now, 9 people out of 100 are going to say Chinook.
Possibly, yeah.
9 out of 100 people are going to say Chinook. I remember back in about 2009. This is possibly an apocryphal story, I don't know. But obviously, when people go into pilot training in the Royal Air Force, they kind of express a preference where they want to go, fast jet streaming, all this sort of stuff, what they wanted to do. And obviously, everybody says they want to fly fast jets, they want to fly Typhoons, Tornadoes, whatever, And in 2009, fully 50% of applicants expressed the preference for Chinook over Typhoon, Tornado, everything else, because of the way it impacted the public consciousness through Afghanistan.
Yeah,
it had this massive. I don't know what how it was in the States, Mike, for Afghanistan and Iraq for the helicopters, but for a long time and still today, the Chinook is very much front and center of the public consciousness in the UK helicopter wise.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Chinook.
I can absolutely understand and appreciate that. I think for the United States, it's if you look at it in that same vein, it's the Black Hawk and the Apache, just because those are front and center. They're the ones at the frontal lobe that everybody sees. But I mean, when you look at the overall impact of the most important helicopter ever, it is absolutely unequivocally the UH-1. Fight me, Drew. Fight me.
Please don't. We don't want bloodshed.
Frankly, to me, it's ugly. I've never been. Oh, don't you show that bell at me, Jonathan. I don't think the Huey is a pretty helicopter by any stretch of the imagination. I actually think the Chinook is kind of sexy in its own way. But if you look at the overall, again, I would say this: the global importance of the Huey, especially for America during Vietnam, that's what we saw on the news. Even when I was a little wee lad, if you guys just trying to be Brit right now, that was on the news. You'd see the guys flying, the wounded guys and rescuing and things like that.
I think that's why the Chinook entered the public consciousness here so powerfully, was because we always saw it on Missions of Mercy. There were whole documentaries made about the medical emergency response teams in Afghanistan, and they were always, we've all seen the footage on the Chinook of the pilot who got shot in the face and still got the aircraft back to base. Because they got some really, I don't know if you ever got to see it in the States, but there were a few documentaries made here of the emergency response teams, and they didn't spare any of the shock value, shall we say.
There's another reason, though, I think why the Chinook is so popular, in the same way that the Harrier is so popular. And I think that's down to air shows. I think that when you go to air shows, you watch these things. The Chinook is like the ultimate performer at any air show.
Really is.
You can watch the fast jets, you can watch the Typhoon, the Tornado, and all that sort of stuff. People remember a Harrier going backwards down a flight line in the same way that they remember a Chinook going up, tipping up onto its nose and thinking, this thing's going to crash. How does
Gentlemen, I'm going to have to boot you from the room pretty much shortly, because I'm due to do ghost stories in about 5 minutes, and I need the MacBook. So the funny thing is, you mentioned Chinook, because when I had my day off on Thursday and I got my camera and all my kind of wildlife gear and went to Breandown looking for wildlife, I saw wildlife. In fact, the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force were having a great time bombing up and down Breen Sands, doing low-level passes and everything. And this Chinook, rather obligingly, did a lovely pass at Uphill Church in Weston-super-Mare, which was rather nice, but also did have a Westland Wildcat coming low over Breandown, which was awesome. I had a great time.
I do like the Wildcat. I think that's a good-looking machine.
The Wildcat is starting to grow on me. I'll just pull up another picture here a second. The Western Wildcat is starting to grow on me. I like the Lynx. I always thought the Lynx was a nicely proportioned helicopter. But now that I've kind of grown used to the Wildcat, that was the one that flew past on Thursday.
Chubby Lynx.
It's a chubby Lynx. It's a stealth Lynx, I think is the best way of putting it. So, but yeah, you kind of go out for the afternoon to leave the day job behind, and the day job follows you. So,
some of the
Jonathan, I know you're getting ready to boot us, but if I may have just 1 second.
No, yeah, go on.
Shut up, Drew. Drink your beer. Spencer, get one.
I'm absolutely champing.
Come on! I've got ghost stories to read. Come on!
Your ghost stories can be ghosted for a second. I want to personally thank you guys for allowing me the time to join in and have some fun talking things other than business for me, because I love what I do with Facebook.
And you were the only one who said yes. So.
Well, that's their problem. But for me, it is really just great to sit and chat with friends about things that are. I mean, I never thought we were going to talk about flipping helicopters, for God's sakes.
I wasn't sure where that came from.
But just having this time with you guys and spending the weekend watching this whole Telford broadcast with all the demos and the tornado review, which I sadly missed. I think I was sleeping, Spencer, when he did that. But truly, it's a great honor to be friends with all three of you. I don't take it for granted. I've known Drew the longest, obviously, but Spencer and Jonathan, you guys have been very accommodating, and certainly I really appreciate being welcomed into the inner circle of some sorts as the backup rhythm guitar player from America.
Into the cabal.
And honestly, it for me, just like I just alluded to, just stepping away from the business of modeling and into the world of my hobby, our hobby, if you will, is just really cool. And certainly I hope that we get to spend more time. I mean, I know we talk a lot here and there, mostly me, in the back channels, but you guys have been fantastic friends, and I certainly don't take it for granted.
Excellent.
And also, I think, just very quickly, John, before we go, we should thank everybody once again that's spent time with us today, shouldn't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think that the hope is that people have tuned into this bit this evening with a beer.
Mainly for me.
Hopefully, I hope they've tuned in actually with an online order of cake. So that would be splendid. I don't have any
they're
cake
absolutely
today.
sick and tired of seeing me and John, probably. So to see other faces, it's
yeah. No,
it's got to be
I think as I said earlier on, we've got to the this is it. This is the end of day one. And apart from a couple of little technical hitches, it's gone absolutely splendidly, and it's tremendous. Obviously, I'd like to thank Drew and Ivan and Jen and Spencer and Mike Williams. I'd like to thank Chris Buckholt and Matt Whiting and Andy Farmer and Mr. Mike Reeves for coming along today, and more importantly to everybody who decided that watching this was going to be a productive use of their time on a Saturday.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock for day two. That's French of the Festival of Modelling. So it just remains for us all to, again, thank you very much. Keep the comments coming. Keep posting your projects up on our wall. We'll be doing more updates and bits and pieces during the weekend as well. We're actually going to have a competition tomorrow as well. Models for Heroes have very kindly offered one of their lovely mugs as a prize. So tonight I'm going to go to bed and try and think of some kind of competition that we can do that.
Try and think of and win the competition.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, it just remains to say thank you, Michael, for joining us. There we go. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Andy. Thank you to everybody watching. And we will be back on the air tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So from us all here at the Interesting HQ and in America and in Yeovil and in wherever it is up in the north somewhere, the Midlands. Shropshire, that's it. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience. And good night.
Cheers, boys. Thank you. See you tomorrow.